Hi everyone, Sandman here. I sat down at the end of August to chat with DDJ, also now known as Bob Lewis, to discuss his lawsuit against Google. But before I get into it, let me tell you about today's sponsor, the Brave browser. Zuck the cuck drinks water like a duck, but he also drinks your data. So tell him and Google to shove your data up their schwing by downloading the Brave browser. It's free, blocks online advertising, and protects your privacy and data from evil tech companies. You only see ads if you want to see them, and you get free cryptocurrency for your attention. You can cash them in for real shekels. Don't let Zuck use you to make a buck. Download Brave by clicking on the link down below. So welcome back, everybody. So today I'm deciding to talk with DDJ, better known now as Bob Lewis, who came out and exposed his identity, as he's now filing a lawsuit against Google and I guess YouTube, and I guess he'll fill you in on it. So go ahead, Bob.
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, I appreciate you having me on today and having a conversation so I can kind of educate people a little bit about what's going on with my lawsuit. So on the 22nd or so of August, I did file a lawsuit for 10 causes of action against Google and YouTube. Now, as a lot of people know, YouTube has demonetized my channel, and they've deleted a few of my videos. I've had 4 videos deleted. I've had a total of 2 strikes and 1 warning over the course of, I don't know, since I started actively using my channel in May of 2017. But with that said, I'm not the only person who's going through this sort of thing. YouTube is started to accelerate censorship with regards to a variety of YouTube channels. A lot of YouTube channels are getting deleted. More and more channels are getting demonetized, and they're getting algorithmically censored. So I think what I'd like to do first, if it's okay with you,
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of talk about the lawsuit a little bit, and then I want to talk about some larger issues that the lawsuit brings up that aren't necessarily directly related, but I think that they're related to a bigger picture issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so the main issues that I'm suing under for the lawsuit purposes is 42 U.S.C. 1983. That's the civil rights law for the United States. Now, everybody else who sued under this statute didn't meet one of the threshold necessities to make this work. So in order to sue under civil rights under 1983, 2 things have to happen. It's like a 2-prong test. The first prong of the test is you have to show some sort of discrimination, and then the second prong is you have to show some sort of government involvement, okay? Now, for the statute, they call it state actor. Well, every lawsuit that's been filed prior to mine, they have never alleged any kind of state actor or government involvement, which is why all those suits are failing. So one of the things that I've done instead, if you read the lawsuit and you get down to approximately as I scroll through it right now, page 6 of the lawsuit, I actually show where Google is and YouTube are state actors, but they're not state actors of the United States. They're state actors of China, the European Union, and over 17 countries total. And what they're doing is they are silencing Americans' free speech under the guise of foreign hate speech laws. So, for example, the United Kingdom has hate speech laws where you can go to jail for it. Germany has them. France has them. China
Canada has them.
Canada has them. Exactly. So what's happening is that Google, in compliance with these foreign governments' laws, are silencing U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. That's a problem. Now, the other thing that's important to understand is that the reason that I'm suing for this and the reason I'm able to is because I have standing because they've done this to me. This is part of the demonetization. This is part of the censorship. I show later on and I'll talk about it a little bit more about the algorithmic censorship.
Well, so
there's a lot of stuff going on just there.
I've been hit by the algorithmic censorship, and I'd say in the last week, I've seen my traffic drop in the last, say, month and a half from roughly 65,000 views a day down to about, like, the last few days, like 33,000. So they've effectively cut my traffic in half. Then your videos are still holding out okay, but like my back catalog of videos is being, like, it's getting almost no traffic, which is kind of bizarre. So they're algorithmically censoring a lot of channels. Like I've been looking through Social Blade for about I don't know, 20, 30, 40 different channels, and they're all dropping like really, really quickly. So I don't know if they really even need to delete us at this point, if they can just kind of like quarantine us and drop our views to next to nothing, then, there's, I mean, what can we do? We can't do anything. We can't prove anything. And on
Actually,
top,
we can.
how can we prove it?
Well, actually, it's good that you mentioned that, and it's good that you asked that question. So one of the ways that we can demonstrate it is with the Project Veritas leaks that came out, I want to say in late June, that were recently published on Project Veritas' site. And this, I actually bring this up in my lawsuit. And I guess because we brought it up now, let's go ahead and talk about the full issue because there's greater implications here as well. So the Project Veritas leaks came out. There were 950 pages of internal leaks from a Googler. I want to say his name is like Zach Voorhees or something like that.
I think the Voorhees is right.
Yeah,
yeah. Go ahead.
I forget his first name, but for purposes of conversation, let's just call him Zach for now.
Okay.
I could be completely wrong. This could be a boomer moment.
No, you're right.
So
Voorhees.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the right name.
But Voorhees. So now what he did is he actually gave that information to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then he leaked it to Project Veritas, and he came out of the shadows and said, yeah, I'm this guy. I'm the one who gave this information out so he could confirm it. And he worked for Google AI. Now, the interesting thing about this is that what it shows is it shows not only does Google and YouTube maintain multiple blacklists, but in addition to that, what it shows is that they have the ability to algorithmically boost or censor content at will. In fact, what they can do is they can create these small programs called Twiddler, Twiddler, and in addition to Ad Scorer, and what allows the Google employees to do is they go to Sandman's channel and they say, well, gosh, that Sandman guy, he's inappropriate. We need to censor him. So they can write a Twiddler and they can filter your content. So let's say one of Sandman's videos goes viral. Well, now it's not going to go viral anymore. So we can make it so that it won't even go past, let's say we don't want you to be seen on the first 3 pages of search results on YouTube or on Google. We could drop you to page 3 if we want, and no one will ever see you ever again.
Well, what's really interesting is like if you look at the MGTOW content that's been coming out recently, I still get on the first page of the search results in terms of YouTube, but there are anti-MGTOW channels, probably 5, 6, 7 of the top results are all, web YouTube channels that say why MGTOW is a bad thing, and it's like
right. Well, let me finish, and then we can kind of talk about that too because that's important, and it's also a key portion of my lawsuit. So they can drop that traffic down to nothing. But here's the other thing. They can do what's called real-time boost. They can do it with a program called real-time boost, or they can use Twiddler, and they can boost content as well. So let's say I want to boost, the grooming of trans children, and I want to boost, Desmond is amazing. I can make those videos go viral just by changing the Twiddler. So I can push views to that video. I can push likes to that video. I can push dollars to that video. Now, let me tell you the long-term impact that nobody has discussed prior to my lawsuit. When you artificially boost content and you artificially demote or delete or hide or algorithmically filter or censor content, what you're doing is you're defrauding advertisers and you are defrauding YouTube content creators, YouTube video publishers. And what I mean by that is that so if they go in and they say, gosh, we want to promote trans ideology, so they put all these trans videos and they make them all go viral. Well, now what they've done is they've artificially inflated the view count and the visibility of these videos, and they're defrauding their advertisers now by overcharging them. And again, Google and YouTube don't pay anything. The money comes directly from the advertisers. Now, and it goes right through their AdSense. Now, on the flip side, what they do is, Sandman, for example, let's say you were still monetized, they can conceal your videos, and when they conceal your videos, you lose ad revenue because they're artificially demoting it. So they're committing fraud on the content creators who use their platform, and they're committing fraud to any advertisers who advertise on that platform. This is huge. This is absolutely huge because advertisers have sued for this in the past, and Google in those lawsuits, and I've read some of them, in those lawsuits has flat denied they do this. And in addition to that, when Sundar Pichai, otherwise known as Captain Cuck, When he testified before Congress, he actually said, "We don't blacklist. We don't manually adjust this. We don't manually interfere with the search results. The
But there's the
algorithm does."
proof.
But the proof is there.
Yeah.
And that the
I mean,
the project.
I saw the
Yeah.
Steven Crowder tweet where he actually put himself. He showed the list, and he was on that list. And his
Yes.
channel's been massively like dropped in traffic the last few days. Even like the last 2 or 3 days, they actually changed their algorithm yet again. So let me
Right.
just
Well,
go ahead.
right. And so when I talk about that, that's actually included in my fraud charge against Google. That's like the fourth or the fifth cause of action is fraud, because Google has done this to me, YouTube has done this to me, and they lie about their terms of service. They say they're a free speech platform. They're not. So this algorithmic censoring, it is a huge issue, and it's how Google and YouTube make the majority of their money. Google is the biggest moneymaker of all the Alphabet properties, and they're doing it through fraud. Now, I made a video about this, about the Google AdSense auction, and about how it was not transparent and how it was fraudulent months ago. But this was before these leaks came out. But now that these leaks have come out, you can see the fraud in black and white. And again, it's not just the algorithmic censoring that's the issue by itself. It's the fact that you have YouTubers being defrauded out of possibly, millions of dollars collectively of ad revenue they should have gotten, that they've been irreparably damaged. Not only has their brand been damaged, my brand has been damaged, my reputation has been damaged, my reach to potential viewers has been damaged, and obviously my pocketbook has been damaged. But on the same token, Ford Motor Company, all these major companies, they're getting robbed by Google because Google is artificially inflating ideological content. So that's a problem.
Well, you see, what's also happening is by taking a lot of the channel traffic away from a lot of the channels that they don't like, they're basically creating more artificial scarcity in terms of the advertising platform. So that's basically boosting the ad rates because there's less ad space to go around, right? So
Well, I think that's part of it, but the other part of it is that when they artificially boost content, it artificially adjusts the price of the ad auctions
yes.
themselves. And that's another fraudulent aspect of this. And again, this is something no one's discussing. So yeah, I agree.
Well, I have another YouTube channel that I've been using for quite some time. It's called Cool Buildings with a K, and I've been looking at the ad rates because I haven't been demonetized on that because that channel is as white as Wonder Bread. It's like perfectly clean. There's nothing on there that's political at all. So they didn't take the monetization away from it, and the ad rates have been skyrocketing. Like it's probably up to around $6 CPMs right now, $7 CPMs, and like for the last 4 or 5 years, it's only been like $3 CPMs, and in that on that channel and just in general. So I think there's definitely something going on in terms of them reducing the amount of ad space. Because I've also been noticing channels that have like gaming, that do like just basic gaming channels, they're getting demonetized for duplicate content, even though all the content on their channel they've created themselves. So they're demonetizing not just controversial political channels, they're demonetizing everything they can get away with.
Well, and let's be real about this, because this happened on my channel as well.
When
Not
did
only
your channel get demonetized?
right after I published my New Zealand video back in March of 2019.
Okay, so you didn't get hit by the Carlos Maza thing. And did you get completely demonetized at that point,
Yes.
or did you get shadow demonetized where you're just
No, I got completely demonetized. I had been shadow demonetized for over a year, where anytime I upload a video, they automatically demonetize it, and then they wouldn't remonetize it for 2 weeks.
Well, you
That
just
type
had
of
to reapply, right? Like so.
Right.
But that's been going on for years, and that was okay because I would upload. I wouldn't release a video for a week anyway. So by the time I had filed an appeal, it got around to me, and then they said, okay, we're going to let your video through. But you see that they were doing that as like a kind of passive aggressive way to get people to stop producing content, and they've been slowly increasing the.
Let's be real. That's part of it, but the other part of it is that they wanted to defraud people of ad revenue, which is about what I was going to get to. So when they demonetized my videos, they kept showing ads on those videos. But
I've noticed that. Yeah.
They weren't giving me any revenue.
But there's no proof. You can't prove that unless you have access to their server to actually see.
That's actually not true. I have witnesses. I actually had my viewers comment in the channel what ad they were seeing, what time they were seeing, and when they were seeing it. I recorded and documented all that.
Okay.
So I actually have some evidence that they've done it, and that'll be evidence that I present in court. But this whole thing, I mean, we could have a whole video on just this whole piece, but that's just one small element of my lawsuit. There is so much here that it Google and YouTube have never been sued like this before, and I think that that's the thing that's important. Is that people don't understand that there's a lot of misinformation that's been out there about what the laws do and what the impact is on some of these laws, but more importantly, how to enforce them. So, for example, you remember when Laura Loomer did her lawsuit, she was suing for political discrimination, and I think Tim Pool had talked about political discrimination as well. Remember that?
Yep.
Okay, so one of the things that I took issue with is that I thought that that was the wrong way to go. You see, under 1983, if foreign governments are interfering with Americans' free speech rights, part of a First Amendment right to free speech as a United States citizen is the freedom to affiliate or the freedom to associate, which means that if you're a Democrat, you can associate with Democrats. If you're a Republican, you can associate with Republicans. If you're a white nationalist, you can associate with white nationalists. If you're, Black Lives Matter, you can associate with Black Lives Matter, and it is illegal to retaliate against you. Well, that's what's happening with Google and YouTube, is they are retaliating against those who choose to associate with the conservative groups, whether it be Proud Boys or the Republicans or the Trump campaign or anything else. And again, that's discriminatory. Not only is it discriminatory under First Amendment grounds, but it is national origin discrimination in that Christians and patriotic Americans and people who support the American way of life and constitutional rights, those people are being discriminated against and silenced. So the second cause of action I'm suing under is 42 USC 2000A, because what I'm stating is that YouTube.com, Google.com are places of public accommodation, and they are considered, at least YouTube.com, they're considered an online theater. And the Department of Justice has come out and they've said, yeah, websites could be places of a public accommodation. And we've had that view for almost 20 years. So all I'm doing is I'm applying it in a civil rights lens to show that we need to hold these people accountable. And I'm using Packingham versus North Carolina to do it, where that's the first case that the United States Supreme Court put out in 2017, where they talked about taking laws that are already on the books and applying them to cyberspace or to the internet. So I think that those things are extremely important as well. But I'll shut up at this point so you can give some feedback. Sorry about that. I get a little soapboxy.
I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's just I don't like, I see all of this and it really scares the shit out of me, because I look at once I look at it this way. I look at Americans not standing for this in the long run. And I see the right and the left eventually going to some sort of civil war over this kind of crap. Because at some point, if YouTube just decides to censor everybody, starts deleting everybody, and we can't even build alternatives. Like, I mean, we're lucky to have BitChute right now, but if we don't have alternatives, people are going to start to lose it. Like, they need a release valve for their frustration. And if they don't have a way to kind of release the pressure, they're going to do it by arming and attacking. And, I kind of grew up a little bit here and there in former Yugoslavia back in the early to mid 80s. And I remember the ethnic tensions that were building in that country, as well as the ethnic tensions with the same groups over here in Canada. And the thing is, I'm kind of mixed, but I've got a mix of two of those ethnic groups. So for me, I kind of saw this as bizarre. Like, why would people go to war because of religion, right? Because this is just kind of a bizarre kind of thing. I didn't really understand it. And I can see the exact same tensions starting to happen right now in the United States. Like, I've traveled, I don't know, to like 30, 40 states in the last 3 years. And I'm really starting to see tensions. Like, if people even perceive you to be leaning to one side or the other, they immediately get like hostile towards you. It's like the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And I'm kind of a centrist. I don't really lean right or left, but people they look at your attitude, they see the way you speak, and they just kind of instantly categorize you, and then therefore they can basically, treat you differently. So I'm starting to see these massive divisions, and YouTube and Google and the entire social justice culture is just, perpetuating these things. and I just see it going into a really, really bad direction. Like, I don't know if it can
I
be stopped
agree.
at this point. I really don't know.
Well, and one of the things that I would say too is that Google and YouTube have figured this out, and the social justice movement have figured this out. That's why they're starting to pass red flag laws right now, because they don't want patriotic Americans to arm themselves and to defend their civil rights.
But it's too
There isn't.
late.
I don't
The
think it is.
guns are already out there. There's 400
Right.
million guns. What are you going to
Oh, no,
do?
no, no, no. I agree with that. But what they want to do is they want to send SWAT teams to people's houses and start shooting them before the war comes out. They're trying to disarm everybody so they can have a peaceful transition to American communism.
Yeah, but they
That's what
can't
they're
do
trying to
that.
do.
People are not going to be that easily disarmed. It's
I
impossible.
I agree, which is why you're seeing some of these people get shot. I agree. But I think that what's going to happen is that listen, our country lives or dies on whether or not our free speech rights are protected. Because if we don't have the ability to speak out and
Yep.
to communicate what's on our mind, whether we agree or disagree, or whether we offend or don't offend, everything else falls. That's the linchpin of the country. That's why it's the First Amendment of the Constitution. So one of the things that I talk about in the lawsuit is, in order to defend that First Amendment right, I think we have to declare Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act unconstitutional, because it specifically says in the statute that you can violate people's civil rights. You can violate their constitutional rights. You can censor constitutionally protected material. And we've seen it. We've seen politicians get censored by big tech. We've seen elected officials. We've seen government officials. We've seen churches, all these different groups who have constitutionally protected rights. We've seen them all get censored. And frankly, the Constitution very specifically says that Congress will pass no law that interferes with the right to free speech. So I'm challenging Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act because big tech is using it in the exact opposite way that the statute was meant to be used.
Yeah. I mean, here in Canada, we had like in back in 2013, the government changed it so that you're free to say whatever you want on the internet. But if you say things that would be considered hate speech on the radio or television, then they can get you. And what I found really interesting was the interview I did with this French television station over Skype, which is protected under that government law. They interviewed me over the internet, but they were pushing so desperately to get me to basically go on camera. And if they got me on camera, they could have got the government after me here in Canada. So that was one of the reasons I decided not to. Obviously, not the doxing was also a big important part of that, but also I didn't want to go on camera because I knew that law was there. And so they're pushing hard. They're really pushing hard, and it's like they can't, I don't really see how they can win in the long run. I mean, if Americans are still armed, if Americans still have the right to freedom of speech, if they go to other platforms, and if you can bypass all of these things in a big way, then I don't see how they can win in the long run. Because remember, for the most part, most people don't really use freedom of speech. They're like, in terms of they're not saying anything controversial. But the controversial people will just go to other platforms, and then they'll be safe to say whatever they want.
Well, they're going to be safe to say it until the online impact actually catches up with them. You see, this is the thing that Google and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter aren't telling anybody. You see, in their hubris, they're actually entering into treaties with governments. Okay? The Code of Conduct, the European Union's Code of Conduct, they actually signed that with government entities, multiple government entities. The Christchurch Call Agreement, which was signed by 17 different countries, was also signed by a bunch of big tech. And the other side of this is that Google is actually funding a lot of the nonprofit organizations that are attacking free speech. They're not only funding them, but they are practicing entryism, and they are having their employees, full-time employees, they're paying them up to 6 months' salary to work with these nonprofits to quote-unquote guide them. So they're throwing money at them, they're giving them free labor, and then they're basically saying, do what we ask you to do. Now, this is above and beyond the news articles from a year or two ago where it came out that Google was paying like a 400 or 500 separate academic organizations to write pro-Google articles. So you see this propaganda, it's top down. Now, the reason I bring this up and the reason it's important is because we have to look at the dark side of the impact of this. And we're going to use Southern Poverty Law Center as our example.
Yep.
So Google is partnered with the Southern Poverty Law Center as a 501c3. It's one of their nonprofit partners. In return, Southern Poverty Law Center is a Google YouTube trusted flagger. They actually help develop the algorithms that Google uses to silence free speech in the United States. Now, in addition to that, Google, now I don't know if they're actually doing this or not, but according to their website they do, they assign employees, full-time employees, to work with the Southern Poverty Law Center for 6 months at a time, in addition to handing them donations and handing them money. The reason this is important is because I did a video, I want to say December of last year maybe, I don't remember right now, having a boomer moment, called Southern Poverty Law Center Finances Terrorists, where I demonstrate that the Southern Poverty Law Center is financing by any means necessary, otherwise known as BAM, Yvette Falarca's organization, and they are an Antifa organization. So they're not the only organization doing this. I mean, I did a whole expose, a 5-part series where I expose a lot of NGOs who were financing terrorism, financing protests, financing the entryism into these other organizations. This is top down from big tech. And so what's happening is they're trying to wag the dog, and they're hoping that all these NGOs will put pressure on companies so that they can have this AstroTurf campaign to go, look, you need to have an adpocalypse. You need to change your views. You need to have a diversity team. You know, we need to have jobs for our gender studies degrees so that we can indoctrinate America. And the problem that you have with that is that it destroys brands. I mean, look at Gillette. They lost $12 billion over this social justice trash. But the reason I bring that up is because we see these nonprofits going after people for exercising their right to free speech. This is part of the major fraud that is Google and YouTube. And then finally, one of the main things I challenge, is that Google and YouTube's terms of service are unconscionable. Now let me kind of explain the thought process behind some of that. So, random person files a lawsuit against Google and YouTube. Google and YouTube's response is to make a motion to dismiss and to say, look, our terms of service require you to arbitrate and to come out of court. And on top of that, we have immunity under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Now, they always win. Every time they do that, they always win. So the only way that you get around it is to challenge Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which I believe we have successfully done in the complaint. And on top of that, we have to challenge the terms of service as being what's called an unconscionable contract. Now, the law of unconscionable contracts is well settled throughout the United States. And I plead in my case a multitude of reasons of why YouTube's terms of service are completely unconscionable, which means they're unenforceable. Now, the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is this. When you challenge a federal statute as being unconstitutional, you have to give notice to the Attorney General of the United States. In this case, it's A.G. Barr, Trump's appointee. So my lawsuit is actually going to be crossing his desk, and he's going to have to make a decision of whether or not he wants to A, sit on the sidelines, B, help me tear down 230, or C, fight me on it.
So when will you know?
Well, I have 60 days to serve him, so I'll probably be trying to serve him probably in the next week or two, and then they're going to give us some kind of response. But at the very least, my guess is that Trump will actually see this lawsuit sooner than later because of the constitutional challenge.
This is all big stuff, but okay, so like you said, he has to reject it or he has to accept it. Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, he could just do nothing. He can say, wow, that's neat, and he can move on with his day. Or he can go, let me join the lawsuit and let me help DDJ tear down this law because we think it's bullshit. Or then he can turn around and he can go, no, I think we're going to defend it because all these lobbyists pay us a bunch of money, so we're gonna fight you on it.
So he can effectively just ignore it. He can do nothing.
He could choose to do it, but I doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm pretty much leaning towards that side. So,
yeah.
I mean, why can't they, like you said, you were talking about how the governments were involved in other countries, but in terms of why can't this Section 230 be repealed? Like, why is this such a big problem?
It's because all the companies are taking advantage of it. You have to understand that Section 230 gives blanket immunity for every big tech company for everything they do. You see, the 230 was never meant to protect the companies for what they personally do. It was meant to protect the companies for from what you and I do. So if I put a video together and I make a bunch of racist comments, like overtly racist comments, and I put it on YouTube, YouTube's not supposed to be able to be sued for it. That's the point. That was the reason that 230 was supposed to be in place, was so that you could stop a lot of these lawsuits. Well, what these platforms decided to do was they said, well, since we have the freedom to define things how we want to, which, by the way, is another reason I'm challenging the statute, then they said, well, we're going to make the rules we want to make, and if you don't like it, go play hide and go fuck yourself. And that's what they've done. And so you see these people get taken offline all the time. They get demonetized, they get algorithmically censored, they get their videos deleted, they get their channels deleted. My guess is that since 2014, YouTube has probably taken down close to 1 billion channels. And that's a conservative estimate. Between 500 million and 1 billion channels, okay? That's 3 strikes per channel. You're talking billions.
Well, it doesn't matter about the strikes anymore. A couple days ago, Iconoclast was taken down, and he had 0 strikes on community guidelines or copyrights. So it doesn't even matter anymore. Like at this point, like I posted it, and I've just been funneling as much traffic as I can over to BitChute, and probably in the next couple of days, tomorrow I'll probably be over 9,000 subscribers. In the next month, I'll be over 10,000. So it's growing at about just over 1,000 a month right now.
Right.
So I honestly see, we have to move to other platforms because they're just not going to stop. I don't see it.
Let's be real. It's not even that we have to move to other platforms by itself, but it's also that we have to protect ourselves. Because what's going to happen when the next YouTube shows up?
Well, BitChute is going to basically, I don't think there's going to be another YouTube particularly. I think the whole market is going to fragment. I think that there might be, if YouTube starts attacking other communities, because right now, let's be real, like the people that are on BitChute for the most part, first the extreme right and the extreme, right-wing people showed up and they started building their audience there. But now that audience is kind of being stifled and is being kind of shut down by all the other people like, Sticks and Hammer, Sargon of Akkad, myself. There's 4 main MGTOW channels on there that get into trending every single day pretty much. So, we're being targeted, so we're leaving, we're going there. So whoever gets targeted next, they're going there as well. So eventually,
right. But what I'm saying is that Google and YouTube have the power of government behind them. So they can go and they could shut down BitChute servers for hate speech if they're in any of these countries that have hate speech. That's what I'm saying. Well, I'm saying that you can keep playing whack-a-mole and jump to different platforms as much as you want. I'm not saying anybody should stay on YouTube. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you could jump to all the platforms you want. But YouTube has so much money, they have so much influence, they have so much power that unless they are directly confronted, they will either buy out or they will find ways to shut down these other social media platforms that are out there to compete with them. You'll see this through antitrust demonetizations, like Stripe, for example. MasterCard now has a diversity team, and they're shutting accounts. Chase Bank shut down somebody's account for hate speech. HSBC has been shutting people's bank accounts down.
Yeah.
This isn't just social media platforms anymore. The problem is that this is socialist and communist cancer.
Yep.
And the reason I bring this up, and when I thought about that, because I've spent probably about a year and a half researching this. But when I started thinking about the long-term things, I thought, well, yeah, you're right. The first thing to do is to start diversifying the platforms. So when TFM switched over to BitChute, I did as well. I'm also got some videos over on D Live. And, instead of using Facebook, I'm using Minds. Instead of using Twitter, I'm using Gab. And so there's those options that are there. But even the platforms themselves are under attack. The people that are the web registrars,
there's Epic Domain. I looked at this before calling you. There's this company called Epic, and they're basically protecting people like Alex Jones. They're protecting BitChute. The guy who started that, he's saying freedom of speech is where it's at, right? And that's what he's defending. So, there are alternatives. They're kind of sketchy. Look at what happened with Subscribestar too, right? When Patreon started getting people. So, I think that like censorship breeds innovation. We have no choice but to innovate, right?
I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that no one should go to these platforms. I'm saying you absolutely need to go to the platforms, but at the same time, these people that are doing this have to be confronted.
But I mean, these alternative platforms are not a long-term solution because, see, I look at the election of 2016 in a completely different way. See, if Hillary had won, Hillary probably would have won a second term. And by that point, you're looking at, 2024, 2025, you're looking at states like Texas becoming blue. I mean, there's a YouTuber named James Alsop, and he talks about how Texas, once it flips over and becomes, once it consistently votes a Democratic president in, it has the power to make every single election after that point. So it won't be a two-party system anymore. It'll be a one-party system, and there'll be two candidates for the Democratic Party, and it'll always be a Democratic president. And at that point, you're looking at a country that's going to be so severely divided that the people who are traditionally Republican, who are in the center of the country, are going to take up arms. There's no way around that. And so, regardless if Trump had won or lost in 2016, he most likely will win. I don't want to call it, but he'll most likely win next year. He'll go to 2024, and odds are, I mean, I don't know for 100%, but odds are, if you look at the demographic shifts, and if they continue the way they have, there won't be another Republican president after that. And it'll take another 8 years for the American people to wake up and realize, wait a minute, we're not getting another Republican president ever again, right?
I actually respectively disagree with that.
Why do you say that?
Because Generation Z is proof that Briffelt's law is not infallible, and it's proof that the Overton window is not going far left.
Well, I heard a very interesting thing about a Generation Z a couple days ago. Somebody was saying, I can't remember who it was. They're saying how, well, it's the conservatives that are having 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 children, and the Democrats are having like 1 to 1.5 children per couple. So you're looking at the reason Generation Z is becoming more like right-leaning is because more children are being born on the right side of the political spectrum.
I actually don't believe that either.
You don't believe that either? Okay, so what do you believe?
No. I believe that the reason that Generation Z is so conservative is because, and I remember my own childhood, it's because children are assholes and they're rebellious. And there is so much social justice being shoved down their fucking throat every day at school, every day at church because of feminist, entryism into Christianity. And everywhere else they go, their part-time jobs, their sports teams and everything else. I mean, they practically have loyalty officers everywhere they go. And these kids are like, I'm a fucking teenager, fuck you, have a nice day. I mean, if everybody remembers what they were like as teenagers, we all had a rebellious streak. Now, I do agree with you in that, yeah, conservatives are having kids and they're having more kids than liberals are. That does have some impact. I'm not saying that has no impact.
That's why the liberals would want to import more people from the third world to make up for the loss of votes.
And I'll tell you what, and that's been cancer for them. Because they import 100 people and 5 of them are rapists, 5 of them are drug dealers, 5 of them are murderers. I mean, that has turned into a PR nightmare.
Well, it's bankrupting places like California. Like it's going. I mean, if you've been paying attention to Stefan Molyneux's series that he's been doing, Downfall in the Golden State, I think it was.
I've been calling California dog shitistan since I've been on the internet. I've been talking to Grizzly MGTOW, who he lived behind enemy lines in L.A. I've been to San Francisco a few different times. I mean, the whole state has been dog shit for 5 years. I mean, it's been a no man's land for 5 years. Like 5 years ago, Oakland, California, which is right next to San Francisco. Yep. Okay, there are over 400 crimes law enforcement won't even show up for. You have to go online and fill out a form.
So it's like Detroit.
Yeah. And there's like and since I think it was since 2000, there's like 10 or 12 Californian cities that have filed bankruptcy. So
Oakland being one of them, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad that Stefan Molyneux is actually bringing attention to this finally. But this is something that's been talked about on the internet for years, and it's been cancer for a long time. But I mean, and that's the one advantage is that you look at Baltimore, you look at Detroit, you look at Chicago, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York City. all those places are
And
dog
all
shit.
those places are losing population, ironically. People are migrating out because it's too expensive and the quality of life is collapsing unless you're
Yeah,
super wealthy.
yeah.
And all this social justice stuff is starting to really cause massive problems in them.
Well, they're refugees, is what they're doing. Is they're creating refugees from the left, and the Democratic Party. I mean, their participation is at an all-time low. I mean, look at Ocasio-Cortez, for example. I think she's had less than 10 people from her district donate to her campaign coming up. That's how bad it is. They're like, we fucking hate you and you're cancer, and
Well,
they're
you
like,
cost us the Amazon deal, our jobs, right? Like, what are we going to do?
yeah, right, right. So I think that when it comes to a lot of this stuff, I agree with you. I think that there's going to be some kind of civil war, and I think that there's going to be some definite pushback here. But I think that Generation Z is going to continue to vote conservatively, primarily because they're going to get used to the rebellion, and then they're going to realize that they were right.
Well,
And it,
I mean, it'll be a generational shift. I mean, right now they're still young, right? So they're what, like on like 20 and on under, so they don't really have that much voting power. But in 5 or 10 or 20 years,
right, right.
that's when it's really going to shift. So I mean, you could be right on that, but I also think that, if that happens, then the corporations out there might actually have to start shifting their politics in order to keep their customers.
Well, they're seeing that now. I mean, that's the problem is that what's happened is you have the Googles and the YouTube and the Democratic Party. What they're trying to do is they're trying to wag the dog like the Hillary election, right? So they go to these big corporations and they're like, oh my gosh, look, we have our finger on the pulse of millennials and this is what you should do and this is how you should advertise and this is how you should do that. And then they come out with a Gillette ad. And they're like, no, fuck you. Have a nice day. And Gillette loses fucking $8 billion.
Did you hear what the CEOs now said? They're gonna have to basically show male heroes to start selling Gillette product. I'm like, this is hilarious, right? Like, so they're gonna cater to the right, and they're gonna cater to men who like respect masculinity because they realized that disrespecting masculinity is gonna cost them money.
Yeah, well, and that's the point. Is that look, when your target audience doesn't like social justice bullshit, nobody cares. I mean, if you really want to figure out, like, if there's ever an advertiser who's watching this video, listen, calling somebody a Nazi is now a joke. Like people are running around going, I'm a Nazi.
Yeah.
It's a meme, right? So if you don't understand that humor is and always will be irreverent and disrespectful, you're never going to sell a thing because it's going to be the irreverent and the disrespectful ads that are going to be the most effective. This whole social justice cancer and virtue signaling bullshit, that's really what it is. And it doesn't sell products. It doesn't sell products. It doesn't help the economy. And all it does is damages and harms people. And that's the problem is that these people live in a bubble. And this is why, again, when we talked about these left-wing cities in the United States, they're all going the way of Venezuela.
Absolutely.
They're all going the way of Sweden. And they're going to have serious problems. And I agree with you. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to take up arms and say, this is how we're going to do this now.
I mean, Toronto's just getting just as bad. It's like, my parents came to Canada to escape tiny little apartments and socialism and communism. And now it's over here, little tiny 1-bedroom bachelor apartments for $500,000, rents that are like $2,500 a month, which is just
look at millennials, right? Millennials are the surf generation.
Yeah.
If socialism and social justice succeed, millennials become the new Russian citizens. They own nothing. They have to work their ass off to own nothing. They live in these small pods. They're not, studios. It's crap.
They already don't have anything, so of course they're going to push for communism because that might actually mean they get something.
Right, but it won't. They'll just get crucified even more.
Yeah, they're going to be the useful idiots. That's pretty much what they don't realize.
Exactly. And that's something that Yuri Bezmenov said back in 1984. And that's why a lot of people, I mean, you have to know your history and you have to know where you're going. And so I agree with you that, content creators have to diversify. You have to go to free speech committed platforms. But on the same token, we can't just be looking for those platforms by themselves. I did a stream yesterday on Redman Group and Stefan Molyneux was there. And the person who was hosting the show, Donovan Sharp, he asked him, he goes, well, where do you see this going? Do you see this changing? What's going on? And Stefan kind of ripped into him a little bit. And he was like, look, you be the change. Don't sit back and watch and armchair quarterback this. You be the change you want to see. And that's what I realized. Like when I filed this lawsuit and I decided to dox myself, I realized that you I could be upset and just make another video about it. I could be upset and enter into a Twitter war or a social media war with somebody else, right? And but nothing changes because it has no real world impact. Not by itself. You have to have something else with it. And so filing a lawsuit against Google and YouTube in a way that's never been done before, in a way that is completely different than what everybody else has done, that's doing something. You hear all these people on the internet talking about how they just want to help people and they just want to help men and they just want to help patriotic Americans, and they're not doing anything other than making videos or writing articles or things like that. And I'm not saying that everybody should be a legal scholar. That's not where I'm going.
But you know as well as I do that it's an information war, as Alex Jones pretty much says it. So we have to recruit people for the cause. And for example, if I had never started my channel, there would probably be no TFM, right? So there would be a lot of other channels that never would have started up, right? MGTOW was dying when I started it up, and it grew massively. Like I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in Brazil, but there's been huge censorship of MGTOW channels. MGTOW has been exploding in Brazil. And it's unbelievable, the growth rate. If you look at
that's because thought culture has controlled Brazil for 20 fucking years, and it's out of control. It's funny because like all the guys in the United States, they're like, oh, American women, modern women now, they're so promiscuous and everything else, and I'm like, bro, Brazilian women are like, hold my beer.
Well, it's funny because like 10 years ago, there were documentaries where African-American guys were heading to Brazil because they're like, oh, the women here are so feminine and, they're great compared to the American women. And I'm like, dude, they're just being honest about being gold diggers. They're like Russian women.
Right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's my point is it at some point you have to take a stand. At some point it's gonna get worse. That's why I filed the lawsuit. That's why I chose to dox myself. A new path has to be taken. Everybody and their brother can sue Google and they can sue YouTube. And if they sue the same way that the last guy did and the last guy lost and you lost, that's the definition of insanity. You have to do something different. And no one else is doing it. So I'm like, well, shit. I guess it's up to me.
It might be a stab in the dark, but at the same time, it might actually hit the mark. You don't know.
Well, like I said, my lawsuit is completely different than anybody else's suit out there in that the lawsuit, including all of the attachments, the exhibits and everything, it's over 500 pages.
Yeah.
And, it talks about a lot of important things. It's definitely, it has as much legal basis as it does political basis. So it's kind of a 50-50 sort of suit, because it's an issue of national public interest, but it's also an issue of international public interest because of all the foreign interference. There was foreign interference in the 2016 election. It's just it wasn't for Trump. It was against him. It was social media. It was Twitter. It was Facebook. It was Google. It was YouTube. And they realized that now there's even more foreign interference today than there was in the 2016 election. So I think now is the time that I have to file the lawsuit, because I think that the country is coming at a turning point when it comes to free speech and constitutional rights. And I agree with you that things are going downhill fast.
Yep.
My goal is to be, one of the arrows in the quiver to fight for American patriotism and to fight for free speech online. And obviously I can't do it alone. That's why I've asked for, people to donate to a GoFundMe to help fund my attorney and to help fund the legal fees that are going to be coming up with this lawsuit. Because honestly, I expect it to go for years, and I expect probably at the trial court to get hammered and to take it up on appeal. This is why I always say, when you go to court on day one, you need to prepare for your appeal. And that's what I've done. I have prepared for my appeal. I have prepared to potentially take this to the United States Supreme Court. I'm taking this as far as it goes because somebody has to.
I totally respect you for that. But at the same time, like when you say years, in years we might be in a civil war, right? So this is, it's kind of like the process takes so long that by the time you accomplish anything, it could either be completely irrelevant or, like you said, it could just be overturned and you'll have to appeal and you'll have to start all over again.
In 2017, probably 6 months after I joined TFM's show, I would have completely agreed with you. But like you, in the last, 8-9 months, I've traveled all around the country.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you what, I've been to a lot of small towns. I've been to a lot of flyover America. I've been to both
Hmm.
coasts a few times. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of resistance to social justice bullshit.
Yep.
There's a lot of resistance on the ground, or
But
like
there's a
the
lot
average,
of acceptance of it as well.
only in pockets.
I mean, okay, I'll give you the pockets that I've noticed where it's the worst, in parts of Michigan,
Right.
around Chicago,
Right. Well,
around
that's right.
New-
Right. In the urban areas, I would agree with you. Those
Wisconsin,
pockets are true.
Miami,
Right. Right.
New York,
Right.
like
Once you get out of tier one cities, though, because that's what you're talking about. You're talking Chicago's a tier one city,
yep,
Miami, New York, they're all
yep.
tier one cities. Once you get about 50 miles outside those cities,
It's a completely different world.
correct.
Same thing in Canada. Like at the moment I drive, I don't know, 45 minutes, an hour outside of Toronto, it's all of a sudden people are nice, calm, polite, rational, and all of a sudden it's like you're in a different world. And the people around Toronto, all the ridings, they vote conservative, and it's just the center, it's the cities that vote, for the Liberal Party here, which is technically considered like the Democratic Party in the United States.
Right.
So no, I totally get this. I totally understand exactly where this is coming from. And you notice that all the people, the migrants, the immigrants, they go to the places that are, liberal or Democrat because those are the places where they're accepted and they're safe. Because the
Well,
moment
and
they,
and yeah, and the thing about it is that like we have the Electoral College in the United
yeah,
States, which serves to be a check against this sort of democratic mob rule that they want to do, and that's our saving grace is that we have a tricameral system in place that includes an electoral college so that we have a way to fight back. And I also think that I agree with you in that no matter what I do with my lawsuit or everybody else does with moving to different platforms, I will say this: I do believe a collapse is coming,
hmm,
and I think at the very least it's going to be a financial collapse, and the tier one and tier two cities are going to be the most affected by it. And so, what the small towns, the rural areas will probably be mostly business as usual within reason, but you're going to see massive, massive social and civil unrest in the tier one cities. I'm thinking, like I said, LA, Miami, Chicago, Baltimore, Los Angeles, San
well,
Francisco.
Baltimore's not a tier one city unless you're a rat. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. Well, I'm saying, yeah, yeah. I'm saying, Baltimore is
But
when I say tier
Washington,
one.
it's the Washington D.C. kind of metropolitan area, and so I
When
kind
I
of yeah.
say when I say tier one city, I'm not talking about rich or poor. I'm talking about the size,
Okay.
the
Yeah. So you're
size of the
talking about,
infrastructure.
anything down from New York to say Washington. So that whole area is going to be affected. No, I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. I mean,
Yeah.
I will corroborate this because when I was younger, when I was in the mid '90s, I went back to former Yugoslavia, and there was an oil embargo, and they lost about 50% of their oil in their economy. And I got to see the consequences of this. And if you went to a place like Belgrade, you would see, people were getting thin, they were getting hungry, like there was like food was expensive, pensions had collapsed. But if you were in the countryside, boy oh boy, you had your own land, you could grow your own food. And if you look at places that have to deal with hyperinflations, 98% of your costs in a place like that, in a place that's gone through hyperinflation, comes down to food. So if you have your own land, you can survive a hyperinflation. But if you
That's
live in a
right.
high-rise apartment building, good luck to you because you
Well,
you
you're going
know,
to eat your neighbor.
or your neighbor's cat, or
Right.
the cat lady's cats, as she,
Right.
she'll go down from 30 cats to, whatever is left at the end.
Well, no, the cats will eat her, and then you'll eat the cats. It's like
Well,
the circle of life.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, but that's the thing is, I mean, when it comes, like I said, when it comes to the lawsuit, I felt like it was time that I had to do more than just consider making videos and things like that. And given that I have some legal knowledge and I have the ability to research this and I understand the YouTube space pretty well, I thought I was uniquely qualified at some level to at least file the suit. And I think that once people see the arguments I'm putting forth as far as legal scholars and things like that, there's going to be some pushback. Everybody's going to get upset about me challenging 230 on both sides of the fence. And there's a lot of misinformation about 230, so I'd just say don't believe the hype. But
But
when it comes to a lot of this, I think that this is the right direction.
I totally agree with you. It's just like I mean, obviously, I can be pessimistic because, I've got good reason to in terms of, just having your lawsuit thrown off the table because, he's having a bad day. I can't remember who you were talking about, who's basically going to see it. So, I have to be skeptical about it, and I'm going to
Oh
continue.
yeah.
I'm going to continue what I'm doing, and if I can survive doing this, because it's getting pretty brutal. Like I kind of want to shift the topic over a little bit to alternative platforms and just dealing with this kind of stuff because right now, like I was saying earlier, my BitChute account just got over 9,000 today, so I'm happy about that. Getting over 1,000 subscribers a month, new subscribers on that channel, which is good because now it's like it's 2014 all over again. So I have to kind of rebuild my audience again, and I understand. I understand the BitChute could go away, so now I'm also working on my own website where I'm going to
Right.
post all of my scripts because everything I type, not for these podcast videos, but everything that I type for my daily content is all in text format. So I can actually have everything up as articles. Now, I don't expect YouTube to index me into their search engine. I don't expect AdSense to accept if I put ads on, which I have an AdSense account, I don't expect them to like even allow me to make a dollar off that, but at least it gives me a home so that I can kind of rebuild from, the loss that YouTube has done. Like I'm used to this. Like back in the mid noughties, up to 2006, 7, I had a huge a huge website presence. And I had 2, 3 million impressions, like not impressions. I had probably about 6 million impressions a month, ad impressions, but I had about 2 million views a month. So I was making good money back then, and it all crashed. So YouTube changed its algorithms multiple times, and then I was kind of screwed. Sorry, Google changed its algorithm. So
Right.
I
Right.
understand how this happens. I understand that they're going to do what they're going to do, and I just have to adapt and move someplace else while I still have the audience to kind of shift away. So I don't expect myself to be around in the next a year or two on YouTube. I really don't. Like I could just wake up tomorrow and my channel could be gone. So I don't know. But I know that I can rebuild. I know that if I have my own website and I'm on BitChute, then I know that I can do pretty much what Alex Jones is doing and I can survive. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's why I made my website because I saw a lot of this stuff coming. And so that's when I was like, you know what? I need a website. I need to diversify. I need to widen my platform, broaden my audience, and I need to start working with other people who care about these sort of things as well. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that having a website presence is extremely important because it makes it a lot harder for people to censor. I also think that I'm probably going to start creating a mailing list as well for people as well
Mm-hmm.
because mailing lists are very, very
Mm-hmm.
hard to censor. So I mean, there's a lot of things
Impossible.
that
How are you gonna stop somebody from sending out mass emails? I mean, unless you
exactly.
literally shut down the internet, you can't do that.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm saying. I think that like, do I think my website's going to be, or do I think my lawsuit is going to be the end all be all? No, I don't. But I do believe that it's a different direction and something new has to be done. And I also think that somebody needs to bring the fight to them. And since none of the, like, you don't see Judicial Watch doing it, you don't see the Trump administration doing it, you don't see the Republican Party doing it. And even Tulsi Gabbard's lawsuit, while it's well meaning, it's not going to push anything anywhere because a lot of people are saying that lawsuit is frivolous. So I'm just saying that something new has to be done in addition to everybody evolving and adapting and going on other platforms.
Well, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the company called Brave and the Brave browser.
I
Now,
use it. Yeah.
okay. Now I've got a little bit of a cautionary tale on the Brave browser, which I've been promoting heavily, and I've been making quite a bit of money. But the problem is they're not paying me my money. So what's been happening is, once Black Pigeon Speaks got thrown off of YouTube and then he got put back on, I started promoting the Brave browser because I realized the only way to beat Google is to demonetize them. So if we stop watching their ads, their income evaporates, right? Like, it doesn't make a big difference per person. You might, drop their ad revenue by, I don't know, two, three, $400 a year at most if you start using something like Brave. So I've been promoting Brave. For every new sign up, I would get $5 in basic attention token. On August the 7th, I was basically told that my account has been temporarily suspended until they review it because there's been suspicious activity. And every single one of my referrals has been legit. I've been promoting it on my channel, and I was getting, I'd say in the 2 months that I had been promoting it, I got about $5,000 worth of basic attention token. So that between that and the ads that I was getting that I would sell on my channel, and everything that I had up to that point, I'd recovered pretty much the demonetization that I had from YouTube. I'd recovered from that almost completely, if not gone a little bit ahead of that. So I was really happy about that. But now my account has been under review for about 2 weeks now, 2.5 weeks, and no one, like, I've emailed them from other accounts and been like, how long does your review process take? And they're like, oh, can you send us your information and we'll review it? I'm like, well, I guess they just don't want to respond to me. They don't want to pay me.
Well, congratulations. You're the victim of their new diversity team.
Well, I looked at the company. I mean, there were guys with purple hair on their website that kind
Right.
of, some kind of like, okay, so if you decide not to pay us, but the value of the Brave browser is that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because
Right.
I've shut off all Brave ads. I don't watch Brave ads anymore, and I'd suggest anyone out there listening, install the Brave browser, use it, but do not watch any ads on their Brave browser. So
Well,
effectively,
you could,
go ahead.
yeah, you could use Dissenter as well. You could just dump Brave and go to Dissenter.
I might just do that, right? So I don't know which one is the better of the platforms.
Well, Dissenter browser is actually created by Gab.
Yes.
And so they don't have, any purple hair cucks that are going to try to shut you down under some sort of, diversity pretense.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, that's probably what I'm going to do. So that's a good suggestion. I'll do that. And but like, I don't know if Gab Dissenter actually has an ad blocker built in. I don't know if that's really the case, because I am now all for blocking all YouTube and Google ads. Facebook, for whatever reason, has found a way around it, and they're just kind of like posting text to kind of get around, not having to be censored like that. Still, some of their ads are being censored, but some of them are still getting through. But these companies have to be punished in the pocketbook. If we start punishing them by taking away their revenue, but what'll just happen? The ad rates will just go up because there'll be less eyeballs. And then the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world are just going to get higher ad rates. But the thing is, their audience is shrinking anyway. It's dying. So they could have, $100 CPMs, but if there's only like 1 million people watching it a day, they still can't run their networks. And this is what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to money, and it's going to come down to tribalism. You see, I think a lot of this also has to do with tribalism, and the people that work in the mainstream media, they also have, they also share people with, with the tech monopolies in terms of their workers go in and out. It's like a revolving door. So they're just trying to help each other. So CNN goes down, but CNN is promoting Google's agenda. So they're going to try to prop CNN up so they can prop their own agenda. But eventually they're going to fade into obscurity because less and less people are watching them. CNN doesn't even get, 600,000 people watching a day, 700,000?
Well, yeah, but the issue with CNN is doing exactly what the Young Turks are doing, right? I mean, they're losing money left and right, but they're so desperate for that fake voice that people are throwing money at them. You have oligarchs across the world that are throwing money at them, which is exactly what happened with the Young Turks. And that's why you see, all these big tech companies, they're going to get behind CNN, they're going to get behind the Young Turks, they're going to push ad revenue their way to try to keep them afloat, when the reality is, they're losing money.
Okay, so I'm looking at the Young Turks statistics right now on Social Blade. So back in October of 2016, so let's say 3 years ago now, they had 77 million views in that month. Now they're averaging 35 million. So they've effectively been cut in half.
Even though they've been cut in half, they're getting millions of views because they're getting pushed by YouTube.
Yeah,
they're getting pushed all the way around.
So they would be down like 80% if they weren't being pushed.
Correct.
And they're just still continuing to go down. So this is, like, if you look at their videos, the number of views is like dropped to next to nothing. CNN puts out a video, it gets like 10,000 views if they're lucky. So, and it just keeps going down and down and down and down. So even with algorithmic boosting, what YouTube is doing effectively is, you see, I used to sell pop-up ads. So it chased my audience away when I had websites because, I didn't think about the long term. I thought about short term profits. They're pushing up all these big name companies that nobody wants to listen to, and in the short run, it's going to help those companies. In the short run, it's going to reduce the amount of ad space, which is going to boost ad rates. But in the long run, it's going to bleed away their audience, and their audience is going to go over to somewhere where they don't have to look at ads and where the content is good. So they're literally killing themselves. So I don't see, like, they don't understand this. Like, again, I don't, like, Google came out in 1998. So Napster, that whole Napster debacle thing happened in like 99, 2000. So, while they were building their business up, this kind of stuff was going on. So I just don't think they learned this lesson from the music industry. I don't think they learn that, hey, if you destroy your platform, if you try to censor everything and you try to control the content, you're going to chase your audience away, and then you're not going to make any money in the long run. It's and I that's what I see happening in the long run.
Yeah, I agree, but I think that they're not taking it from a capitalistic standpoint. I think what's happening is that they're trying to change society. This is about top-down socialism of the elites. So I think
but also, again, they have to be beholden to the stockholders in the end, right? So if you look at something like, let me just look at Google Alphabet stock.
Well, I can tell you right now that the Google and YouTube, if you want to talk about stockholders, they've filed stockholder lawsuits, shareholder lawsuits, and none of them have succeeded yet. And I think it's just because they don't have the right type of ammo. But the other thing that's been happening is that you have a bunch of rich leftists that are basically trying to kill these stockholder lawsuits. So what they do is they go in there and they become left-wing investors, and then they try to create an echo chamber, and they start targeting stockholders who are anything but progressives. I mean, and that's been going on for a while. That's what happened to Yahoo, and it's what happened to some of the other these other tech companies, and now they're getting wrecked as a result. I mean, look at Uber. Uber's losing money hand over fist, or even
well, it never
WeWork.
really made money, but go ahead.
Have you seen WeWork?
No.
WeWork is another left-wing company, and they're bleeding money by the tens and hundreds of millions. And it's, I mean, but they're like, oh, this WeWork is valued at, like, I don't know, it's like $1 billion or something retarded. I mean, it's a lot, right? So we see this top-down push. I think what it is that, like I said, they don't care how much money they throw at it because they have all this kind of money. They just want to push the ideological window.
But once the stocks start rolling over and going down, then they're going to have to start changing. Look what happened with Gillette, with Procter and Gamble. Look, I think the whole attacks on Gillette worked, and I'm not buying a Gillette product anymore. And the thing is, I've got Gillette Fusion, like the most expensive razor you can buy from Gillette. Right. That's the only thing that I friggin' use.
Right.
And I'm not going to renew using that again. So, like, if they, I've still gotten, I don't know, probably like another 5 or 6 or 7 blades left. They last forever and they're great. But if you're going to insult me, I'm going to go to a competitor, and I'm going to.
That's right.
So, they've not only lost in this quarter or the last quarter, they're going to lose for the next 10 or 20 years until the generation dies out, and then they figure out that, hey, maybe we shouldn't have done this, and the next generation might come around and say, hey, let's try these Gillette brands again. But the thing is, their fathers won't have used them, so they'll get used to another brand like Schick or whatever. I don't know. I'm gonna have to find. So it's a generational thing, and all of a sudden, if the fathers that are helping their trans children shave, there just aren't enough of them to make up the market. Gillette is going to have a problem for the next 50 to 100 years because of this campaign. It's going to cost them money into decades, if not longer, and they don't seem to realize this. And I think companies are going to start waking up to this kind of stuff, and they're going to really start to say, oh, we're just not going to create social justice-y advertising anymore and brainwash the culture in the process. So if it goes back to conservative values, then all of a sudden the conservatives are going to start having the dominant narrative in the culture, which is going to be really interesting.
Right. No, I agree completely. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be some huge shifts. I still think there is potential for a civil war.
I do too.
I do believe some kind of, at the very least, there'll be a financial collapse coming.
Okay, the financial collapse. What are you expecting? Because from where I'm sitting, look, they're cutting interest rates to negative. Okay, they're going to go to zero. They're going to go to negative 0.25, and just so they don't have to be giving people out money for mortgages, right? So if you want to buy a house, the mortgage rate will be like 1%, but the houses will be like $2 million, and the salaries won't have moved. So realistically speaking, you're impoverishing Generation Z. You know, like they're gonna get even poorer. They're gonna be living out of vans. Like everybody I know, every YouTuber, every person I know that's interesting and has something to do in life is moving into a van all of a sudden. And all of a sudden, you know, all the national parks and the cool attractions that I've been traveling to, they're getting swamped by like thousands of people. Like it's the most bizarre thing in the world. Go ahead.
Well, in the last 3 years, there have been over 1 million Americans that are actually living in vans, and that's not including the homeless RV generation who do it, you know, not because they want to, but because they're forced to. So you have this huge amount of nomadic people right now. The reason I think a financial collapse is going to come through is twofold. One, millennials have no job skills. Okay, you could be the valedictorian of your gender studies program and still not get a job. And the only job that you're qualified for, other than, you know, being a bigot, is, you know, a barista or a fast food worker or a waiter or things like that. And guess what? All those jobs are going automated. Mm-hmm. All the fast food jobs are becoming automated. All, you know, they have baristas they're automated baristas that make a better cup of coffee. And these companies are going to start firing people and downsizing people for the express purpose of hiring robots. And the social justice movement has pushed robotic workers. Look, there's
the $15 minimum wage is doing this. Like they don't seem to understand this.
Yeah, but UPS is right now, they're using robotic trucks.
Yep. They didn't tell anybody about it, but they had a driver behind the wheel. Yeah, I saw that story like a couple days ago.
Yeah, they're using robotic trucks. You've got Amazon using robots in their warehouses. You've got drones now, drone delivery programs. You've got fast food. So all these unskilled labor jobs in these major metropolitan areas, they're going to go away, which is going to drive everybody to drugs and crime and mental health and homelessness. And that is going to accelerate the financial collapse in the tier 1 and possibly the tier 2 cities. And the only places that are going to be immune to that are going to be places that are rural areas where they don't have the necessity to rely on these tier 1 and tier 2 cities to survive. Thank God in the United States, we still have places like that where they're going to be the oasis in the dog shit that becomes our financial system.
Well,
but you know, the last point I want to make before I let you jump in here is that right now, today, there are over 90 million American adults who are not working.
Well, that's by choice or by force? Like what's going on?
No, it's so the way unemployment is measured now, they've changed the way that they've measured unemployment since the 1990s till today. And when they change the way they measure unemployment, they don't measure a lot of unemployed people. It's because a lot of people can't get a career. They can't get a job anymore. And so what ends up happening is they give up and they leave the workforce. Or, you know, I mean, some of those people, of course, are retired. Some of those people are disabled. But the majority of them are able-bodied and people who could work who just can't find a livable wage job. So, and again, it's because social justice has caused all these people to downsize.
And it's only going to get worse.
Agreed. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
So you're looking at, so basically the left is trying to create its own voter base by impoverishing the nation. This is what is basically happening. So the more poor people there are, the more they're going to vote for the left. And then the more migrants they bring in, the more they're going to vote for the left. So they're trying to kind of create they're trying to create the problem so they can actually come up with some sort of socialist commie solution. It's sickening. I really don't know what to do about it at this point.
Well, I think that you're on the right path as far as switching platforms, diversifying your content, diversifying your audience. I think everybody who's making video content right now needs to do that, not just you, not just me. But I also think that there are people that need to stand against this sort of thing and to speak out against it as well. And so because I have the legal skill to at least, you know, level some sort of credible legal challenge, I'm going to. And I think other people who have, you know, skill sets that can help them, I think you need to use those skills. And if you don't have certain skills, then you need to go get them. Because, you know, this idea of sitting back and being an armchair quarterback, those days are gone. And the people that are actually doing things more than just making videos, and the people that are actually creating the skills they need to survive with less resources, those are going to be the ones who get through this. The ones who are able to tighten their belts, who are able to evolve and adapt. Those who can't are going to go by the wayside.
Well, I mean, I've been looking at in terms of investing. I mean, obviously, if you look at investing and if you look at some sort of a financial collapse, like if it's an inflationary collapse, owning blue chip stocks that pay dividends is not such a bad idea because, if you own money, the money will lose all its value. But if you own something like a telecoms company, like if you own AT&T or Verizon, people are addicted to their smartphones. Sure, the smartphone rates might collapse, 80%. We might actually be paying much, much less. But you know that some money will still be coming through if you own those stocks because those companies are still going to be making money, right? So, but I don't see any kind of hyperinflation happening. And the reason for that is everyone is so up into their eyeballs in debt. Like especially here in Canada, people have like $1 million mortgages on their houses. So if you saw hyperinflation, the houses would pay themselves off. They get free houses. The government and the banks aren't going to allow that to happen. They're going to lose their serfs, right? So while in Eastern Europe, people had already owned their own properties, they had owned their own apartments and flats and houses. So there wasn't really a mortgage culture there at all. People borrowed money for credit, like in terms of spending for personal goods, but people didn't like have credit in terms of their property where they lived. So I don't see a collapse, like a massive collapse happening all of a sudden. I see it as kind of what Japan is going through, in the sense that in Japan, the government is printing the money, and then it's central bank is printing the money, creating the money, and then it's taking that money and it's buying up its own assets to keep the prices high. So the government, for example, is buying its own stocks. It's becoming the largest shareholder in the country. So the shares are not falling in price all that much. They're still high in value. It's just that the government is starting to own the corporations. And I think, and not only the government, but also the central banks. And the central banks are private or get quasi-private government institutions. So the central banks, I think in the United States, Canada, Europe, wherever else, are going to keep creating money, and they're going to keep buying up the assets so that the stocks never really go down in price. Because that protects the wealthy. If the wealthy have their dividend-paying stocks and their income there, then they don't care. The wealthy do not want to lose the value of their assets because they know.
Right, but
go ahead.
Right, but the problem with the wealthy is this: nobody wants to live in a shithole. Look at the mass exodus from New York City. Okay, you look at what is the island that all the rich people live on?
Manhattan or Long Island? Are you talking about the
Manhattan?
Okay.
Manhattan.
Okay.
So Manhattan is actually, from what I was reading the last year or so, Manhattan is actually, people are leaving. There's like a mass fucking exodus. And the reason is because, yeah, they're rich and they got their stocks and everything else. Then they walk outside their door and they have to avoid 5 piles of human feces just to get to their car. Or, aggressive panhandlers or crazy people chasing them down with an axe because there's no civility. So the reason I bring that up, and the reason I think that I agree with you at some level that the government's going to try to intervene, I think that intervention is going to be a failure because the homeless population in the United States is drastically growing. Mm-hmm. And so what's going to happen is, and this is happening now, I used to work for a city. And this was happening back when I was working for the city. It was like 2015, 2016. So what happened is I worked for a small city. There were a bunch of houses from the 2007 housing crisis that were still vacant. So they were foreclosed on houses. These houses exist all over the country.
The banks have just bought them up and they're sitting on them waiting for them to recover. Correct. Or the banks have bought them up and they're renting them out.
No, they're not renting them. They're waiting for
some of them
to recover.
Some of them they aren't, right? This is what's kind of going down.
Right. But I'm saying a lot of them are vacant. And they're not vacant because the banks can't rent them out. They're vacant because the banks won't rent them out. What's happening is the homeless people are seeing that these houses are vacant and they're not on the market. So they're moving in.
And if they live in there long enough, they can basically get status as
correct. Correct. Now, what's happening is, though, this is where the housing crisis is going to get worse this next time around. And we're going to have another housing crisis in the United States because the banks, they're artificially trying. They don't want to lose their shirts. So they're leaving a lot of these houses off the market. In fact, Bank of America, like 6 years ago, was actually paying construction companies to demolish houses to take the product off the market to help keep the prices high. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of these homeless people move into these vacant homes and squat in them, destroying their value and destroying the neighborhoods that they live in and destroying the value of these neighborhoods. It's going to cause a lot of more drama than what it is right now. I know a guy who he has a family member who lives in Long Beach, California, which was routinely considered like a reasonable place to live. But the homeless people have overrun the city.
What?
And yeah, yeah.
I was there like 3-4 years ago. It was like beautiful place, and I guess now it's not anymore.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But then the homeless people come around the corner and start taking dumps in everybody's lawn.
Well, I just didn't see them on the beach. You know, when I was down there, like I went up and down. I drove around for a bit. I went down to the
tourist
beach.
Spots, you're not going to see them in the tourist spots. I'm talking about in the residential neighborhoods.
No, I went to some of the residential neighborhoods. There's one where I filmed a water tower that had been converted into somebody's house, and it was in a nice residential neighborhood. I haven't put the video yet. I got to put that up at some point. And so I went down to the beach. You know, it was like a residential neighborhood right next to the beach. It was beautiful. Like walking around, I didn't see any homeless people. Now Santa Monica and Venice Beach, that's a different story. But like Long Beach. I mean, but again, I didn't, like when I was in San Francisco last, I think it was like 2009, 2010, I didn't see any homeless people, like nowhere. And now people are like, oh my God, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, people can't park their cars without them getting broken in. There's shit on the streets everywhere. So yeah, this could all be changing really, really quickly.
Well, and that's what I think. That's why I think it's going to exacerbate the housing crisis. But the reason I bring it up is because the housing crisis in 2000, from 2000, I'd say 5 to 2007, that created a crisis in the stock market as well. I mean, the stock market, was consistently having all kinds of problems as a direct result of all this. So I think that, as much as people want to invest in certain types of stocks, I'm not convinced that the stock market is going to be the best place as the primary investment engine that's going to be out there. And I do know from reading some business magazines and reading, basically a lot of business journals, that a lot of rich people are actually cashing out a lot of their stocks because when everything falls, they want to have enough cash to buy everything low.
Well, absolutely. I'm sitting on a huge pile of cash waiting for things to crash. But that's why I don't think stocks are going to go down, because everyone's waiting for another 2007, 2008. And they're all like, oh, I can't wait to get in there and buy those bank dividends at like 10%. And, I can't wait to get in there and buy, all these companies for next to nothing. And that's why I don't think it's going to go down. I think they know that people are waiting. People are sitting on their cash. So they want people invested, and they want people to like dump it all in at once. And that's what people normally do. They don't invest slowly over time.
Right.
And you want a dollar cost average in. So like every month I will buy a small number of shares of a specific company. I have a list of about 50 to 100 companies that I like, and then I kind of go through and I buy. I say, there's Verizon. I'm going to pick up some Verizon. And I invest in companies that people are addicted to the product. So people need their dopamine rush from their phones. So they're always going to have AT&T or Verizon or whatever else carrier is out there. People are addicted to junk food and sugar. Like I've cut out all sugar in my diet. I was shaking for a month getting off of sugar. Yep. And so people are addicted to it. So they're going to eat their fast food. They're going to eat their ketchup. And again, this is all the same stuff that Warren Buffett invests in. He owns like the ketchup company, the Coca-Cola company. He knows people are addicted to sugar, right? Like in his little documentaries he makes, they show him going to like a fast food place and like ordering like a burger or something, right? Like it's kind of hilarious, right? That, like he would ever eat his own product that's poisoning, himself.
Exactly.
So, I see it as like, okay, he's investing in things like UPS. He's investing in things like Verizon. He's investing in, fast food companies. He's invested in like Burger King and Tim Hortons is a company that owns both of them. What is it called? I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. So, if you look at the products and the companies that he's investing in things that people have no choice but to use.
Right.
And that pay a dividend. So, and that have a decent like price to earnings ratio. So like there's a certain level of criteria to be a value investor. So, Costco is another company he invests in. You go to Costco, the lines are like out the door every time you go into Costco.
Oh, sure.
So you're not going to lose. Like in the long run, your stock's going to keep going up because there's going to be
Right.
more and more product. And Costco is not greedy like Walmart. They're not going to litter thousands of stores everywhere. They keep it to a minimum number of stores to drive the traffic to those stores to increase the value of their investment. So
Of course.
they try to like, if we can't jam pack this store, we're not going to build it here. We're only going to
Right.
build it when, the population gets big enough for there not, once it gets jam packed in one store, we're going to have to build a second one. We have no choice. But other than that, we're just going to keep this one running. Whereas Walmart, you go into Walmart, half the Walmart's empty, not even like most of it's just, like nobody there. So
Well, they're closing Walmarts left and right.
yeah, because they overbuilt, right? They have too
Right.
much capacity and not enough customers. Whereas
Right.
Costco was smart and they didn't overbuild, and that's why their stock keeps going up and up and up. And on
Right.
top of that, the quality of their food is really good. So, like I said, if there's a hyperinflation, then food will become really expensive, and but at that point, like money becomes worthless. So why would companies even do business at that point? Like it just it's kind of that's why I don't think there's going to be a hyperinflation. That's why I think that it's going to be more of like a slow, steady burn the way that Japan has been dealing with it. And, I think if the housing market does unwind, it's going to be a slow decline over like 20 or 30 years. That's what Japan has been experiencing. It's been brutal and relentless. And every year, the cost of housing goes down a little bit, roughly. So I think that's what's going to happen in the United States. I think it's not just going to be a bang. It's going to be a slow whimper. And that way, people can't just jump in there with their money and like buy up all these undervalued stocks.
Right.
That's why I think dollar cost averaging is going to be the key. Like look at it this way. So every 7 years we typically have a decline in the stock market, 7, 8 years. Well, guess what? That works if we have interest rates that are super high, but we don't have that anymore. So we can't have that boom and bust if we don't raise interest rates to 4, 5, 6, 7%, right? So that there's no credit to be called back because the debt is already so like the interest on the debt is already so low.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and like I said, I mean that might be where things are, and I could see the government trying to step in and trying to fix it. But I do think that one of the differences between the United States and Japan, other than having a more diversified economy, is that Japan's like replacement rate is non-existent. Like you have ghost towns being created
Yeah.
as we speak. It's really bad
I
there.
mean, you can get a flat just outside of Tokyo, about like 45 minutes, half an hour outside of the city, for about $1,200 a month.
Yeah.
I'm like, I might as well go to move to Japan. It's like this makes more sense, right? Like it's a first world country. It's got an awesome culture and technology, and so like I've seriously thought about just like packing up and moving to Japan and eventually just apply for citizenship over there. Like you can technically get citizenship. It's just it's hard to get, but you can still get it if you're
Well,
European.
if Well, and what's interesting about Japan, though, is they're also giving away houses in some of the rural areas because some of the towns are turning to ghost towns.
Well,
And
they
if
have
you
an
meet certain
interesting law.
criteria,
They have an
yeah,
interesting law where if there is nobody inhabiting the house, like I don't know if the taxes go up like massively, so therefore people are pretending like their parents are still alive, so that therefore they can kind of say, well, there's somebody living here, so we don't have to pay
yeah,
more tax. So
right,
otherwise, the house has to be demolished. So you're starting to see like, yeah, you're right. There's ghost towns all over Japan. Like they're just completely deserted, and they can't replace their population naturally, but they also can't replace their population through immigration. And that's the difference between the West and Japan. We're trying to do the whole replacement with foreign migrants, but the problem with that is that if you impoverish the local population by driving down wages, then eventually your tax revenue collapses. And once your tax revenue collapses, you can't afford to pay for all these like welfare programs. So
right,
eventually when 20% of the population becomes migrants, you can't afford to pay them welfare anymore. So the migrants, what they'll do is they'll go to another country where they can afford to go and get the welfare programs there. So now they're going to Sweden, they're going to Germany, they're going to the UK. Well, guess what? They're not going to former Yugoslavia. They're not going to Poland. They're not going to Russia. They're not going to places where the government's not giving them a dime. They're only
right.
going to places where they can get money. So once the West bankrupts itself through migrant immigration policies and all this illegal immigration, I say, well, I welcome, giving all the undocumented immigrants health care, because the sooner we do that, the sooner the whole system crashes and the sooner the migrants no longer come to the United States. So
Right.
so and the left is just so stupid. They don't see this. Like they think that, hey, we're just going to replace our voting population and we're going to win. Well, guess what? If you impoverish the country, your voting population, they're not going to come in. And then what are you going to do?
Well, and I think that the other reason that that's going to backfire on the left is that cities and counties are going to start turning away illegal migrants. And they're going to go, look, you can go ahead and destroy Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago or these other places, but we're not taking these migrants here because they refuse to assimilate. And on top of that, they're here illegally, and so therefore they're federal criminals. We don't want to promote crime because we want to have safe streets, in our communities. So they're going to isolate those cities, and you're seeing some of this now. And so I think that's why I say that when there's going to be a collapse, I mean, there's going to be a multitude of reasons for it, but the migrant crisis will be one of them. I don't think the entire country is going to collapse, but I definitely think that there's going to be a huge financial and cultural issue and a lot of civil unrest in the tier 1 and tier 2 cities and those metropolitan areas around them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recognize Toronto anymore. Like this is not the city I grew up in. Like it's like I'm in some sort of weird bizarro world where I drive around and I'm, the middle school that I used to go to. So I'd go over there and, as a kid, it was predominantly Europeans, and that was it. And now, like, if they let people out of the school, after school, there's like maybe one or two Europeans and the rest is like all foreigners. It's
Right.
like and invisible minorities. And you're just kind of like, well, that's just been one generation. Like imagine what it's going to be like in two generations. And what's really interesting is the migrants, the foreign migrants, they leave and they go to places where they get benefits, but they also follow the white flight. So if the whites go to Oakville, which is nearby, or they go to Vaughan, or they go to they go to Oshawa, these are all cities like kind of outside of Toronto. They follow them. They move into those areas too, and then eventually, after 20 years, the flight continues, and then the locals leave. They go further out. They go like an hour or two away from the city. So you can't stop white flight, and white flight is going to enrich areas that are further and further away from these tier 1 cities, and eventually the tax revenue for these tier 1 cities is going to crash. This is what's happening in Chicago. This is what's happening in Detroit. What's happening in New York. It's happening in LA. It's happening everywhere, right? So eventually these cities, like the people are going to start flocking out of them, and they're going to become abandoned ghost towns like Detroit, and they're going to start falling apart. And I think that's kind of the future of the big centers of the big United States cities.
I think that definitely, more places are going to turn into like Detroit style cities. But I also think that there's going to be pushback from the heartland. And, the main difference, I think, between Canada and the United States is that our Constitution gives us individual freedoms that you guys don't have. And so even though there will be some of that, quote unquote, white flight, and then you'll see the migrants follow them, when the migrants show up, they're going to figure out exactly how unwelcome they are. And then they're going to leave.
But they'll kind of bounce around from area to area. So give me an example of a place do you think the migrants will go to and where they won't be welcomed and they'll be pushed out? Give me an example of that.
Any flyover American state. I think that because again they're not going to assimilate, and I think what'll happen is that they're gonna mess with the wrong person, and they're going to end up on the wrong side of a handgun. They're
So Nebraska, South Dakota,
of the
Wyoming,
states,
any
of the flyover states, and because you're going to see patriotic Americans who are going to go, look, this is not how we do things here. If you can't assimilate into our culture, then guess what? You're fertilizer, and that's the American way.
But the migrants, they're going to go from LA, they're going to move to some other place in California. They're going to move to the district next to the one that they're in. So
yeah,
it's not.
And California as a state is lost.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, I would say take a marker on a map and start from Seattle, go all the way down to San Diego, and then go from San Diego all the way across to Texas, and then draw a diagonal all the way back up to Seattle. I'd say the majority of that is gone. Like like culturally within the next 20 years, like demographically, it's going to be replaced.
Well, Wyoming and Montana and Idaho, I think will push back.
Yeah,
and I think,
definitely.
Yeah, I think that those states will
Utah, I
push.
think for the most part, like
Yeah,
New Mexico is pretty much done.
no, New Mexico's done.
Colorado's
Arizona's
probably
done.
done.
Parts of Colorado. Colorado's
Yeah.
yeah, but I would agree that it's definitely on the downswing. But I think that, like I said, I think that when it comes to a lot of these places, I think what you're going to see is I think you're going to see pushback. And so, I like, don't get me wrong, I think there's going to be a collapse of some kind. I do believe it'll be primarily financial, but I also believe that that financial collapse is going to trigger self-sufficiency, which in and of itself is going to stand as a partial buffer against the
Well,
socialist communist
the
BS.
people in the flyover states are going to have enough food to feed themselves. They're going to have enough resources to, fuel their vehicles because that's where the oil fields are, right? So
That's right.
there's going to
That's
be
right.
enough of natural wealth there. But the poor, the migrants in the big cities are going to be starving, and they're going to be looking for places to go to, and then and
Right,
then
but
and then
but a
you're going to
lot of
see the
these
pushback at that point if there is that economic problem. That's
right,
where
but
you'll
the thing
see it.
about it is a lot of these flyover cities and towns, guess what? They don't have public transportation. There is no bus service to haul the poor around.
Dude, all they need is a flatbed pickup truck, and you can stand like 30 guys on that
Oh,
and drive them
sure, sure.
around. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
you've
But I mean,
seen
at that
that.
point,
I've seen that.
yeah,
We've all
I've
seen
seen it.
that.
Yeah, yeah. But again, that's the
Some
exception,
are
not the
holding
rule.
chickens, so come on. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just saying that I think that at some level, I mean, I obviously we both agree that there's some kind of collapse coming. What the extent of it will be interesting to find out. And obviously, as online content creators, we both agree we need to diversify our platforms, need to make sure we've got a website so people can go and find us and figure out what it is we're doing. And definitely prepare for the worst, because I agree with you. I think that the censorship is accelerating, and you're right. Maybe tomorrow you may not have a channel. Maybe tomorrow I may not have a channel. And to kind of bring this full circle, this is why I filed the lawsuit. I saw the same trends that you saw. I saw the same trends that a lot of people are seeing, and I'm just taking a different way around in hopes that on the way out, while I'm diversifying everything I'm doing, that I at least take a couple final shots in an effort to try to save the system before it drops.
well, this is one of the reasons also that I've been working on that sex robot, which is still kind of in development. But I mean, it's sitting on the back burner. I've started the process of actually getting drawings, schematics drawn, and I'm going to get into the process of getting the damn thing patented, just the idea patented, because it's a good idea. And it's the thing, like if tomorrow I'm done, I can't do this anymore. Well, guess what? I might do the travel channel, maybe. It might take me a couple of years to ramp that up, and I could do that full time. But if I don't do that, I'm going full out on the sex robot thing. And I know there's a market for it, and I know it can succeed.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah,
so
absolutely.
so it's just the head and the vagina that fit on the existing bodies. So I don't even have to rebuild an entire robot. I just have to build, the system for those two elements to it. And I see the potential there. And the best part is that works well into the leftist agenda because it's part of their, idea of disintegrating the family through sexual technologies and through pornography and stuff. So it would probably get way more acceptance than doing what I'm doing now, which is kind of bizarre. So I find that kind of ironic.
Right, right, definitely.
But
So,
go ahead.
well, I'll tell you what, man, I should probably go. I
Okay.
know we've been going for almost 2 hours, but I really appreciate you taking the time
Yeah, I'll
to
put the
chat with me about this
GoFundMe
bit.
link in down below, so that's perfectly fine. So what are your
Perfect.
plans in terms of your channel? What are you going to be doing in the future?
I'm still going to be doing the same content I'm doing. And then I think what'll happen is if they delete my channel, then I'll just add it to the lawsuit as retaliation.
Well, do you have any strikes right now, or are you kind of,
No, 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 there's no strikes. They just demonetized me right now. All my strikes and warnings have gone away. But I mean, the point is I'm going to be on BitChute. I'm going to have stuff on my website. I'm on Gab. I'm on Mine. So I've already diversified. It's just a question of continuing to do what I'm going to do. And, eventually at some point, maybe I'll stop doing YouTube videos and maybe I'll switch to BitChute completely, but not yet. The other thing is too, is that, in researching this, I was going to put out another book this year, and I decided not to because I thought this was more important. So
Well, how many pages of content, lawsuit have you actually had to type up? Like, oh my God.
yeah. Yeah, well, it's not just the typing; it was the legal research. It was putting it
Yeah.
all together. The actual text of the suit itself is 67 pages. The lawsuit, the entire lawsuit, with everything added on, is over 500 pages. So there's a lot of content. There's a lot of material to go through, and I wouldn't be surprised if I get a little bit of success if you see everybody else who's sued YouTube to contact the courts and say, look, we need to amend our lawsuit to make it more to look more like DDJ's.
Maybe. I hope you're right. I hope that this kind of happens. But I think the thing we were talking about in terms of the flyover states pushing back against the the leftist cities that are going to become hellholes, I think that's probably going to be the most realistic outcome in all of this.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. I got to run, but
Okay,
yeah,
no
I
problem.
appreciate time today.
Okay, great. So yeah, just be aware this might take a few weeks before I finally put it out. So I'm not, I usually don't release stuff right away. I kind of take my time because I have advertisers and they kind of buy slots ahead of time and stuff. So,
It's all good.
okay. So good to hear from you, and let's do this again sometime.
Right on, man. Take care.
All right, later.